G'day everyone. Welcome back to a Two Under podcast, the Southern Hemisphere's biggest and best podcast, all things Newcastle United. I'm joined tonight by Jack in Brisbane, and I am Keegan in Geelong, which means there's a bit of a frostiness, I guess, between us. I'm clad in black, not just for the Newcastle result overnight. There might have been an AFL result that I'm still a bit bitter about, but Jack, you'll be up and about, mate. You get to experience another grand final, so you must be happy with that.
Yeah, no, it was a good one. It was a little bit of revenge because Geelong have had the beating of Brisbane in the finals recently. So no, it was an exciting game. And then grand final on Saturday, which is when I'm at a wedding. So I've already asked if they're going to cancel the wedding, but they've said no, they don't care about the AFL. Unfortunately, they're English. So what can you do? I'm sure I'll be able to find a way of watching it somehow.
But I think even on the losing side, like I'm fortunate enough to support Geelong, and I think as of 2022, I think they'd average a grand final every 4 years of my life. So I'm not really one to sit here and complain about not making another one. Like I've said, mate, I said in 2022, my cup is full, and it is still full. So hopefully you and Lee, and I was going to say Craig, but Craig wouldn't even know what we're talking about. So you and Lee can definitely enjoy the fun and success and the happiness that a premiership and even a trophy brings your club, because we don't really get to experience it in any other sports that we follow.
I remember about 3 years ago when the Lions started looking like they might actually get to a grand final. I was thinking, what do I do? Like, I don't know how to react when a club that I follow is actually doing well, and then it's not
a chance to win something.
Yeah, it's not the same with the Lions, obviously, because Newcastle's like it for me, really. But I've followed the Lions since 2018 when I got here, and it was a strange feeling. Like I didn't quite know how to react. So obviously we got to the grand final last year and got beat. It was quite close in the end, but I don't think it ever felt like we were going to win that one. We should have maybe a better chance this time. So see what happens, but I still don't know what to do or how to react.
They'll be halfway through their speeches at the wedding, and you'll be just little fist pumps and yes under the table and things like that, and getting hit from Katie. But enough of that. Let's bring the misery in, and we'll talk about the real pain, I guess. A 3-1 loss, unfortunately, also correctly predicted by me, but it's been coming, hasn't it? Like let's not sugarcoat it, and we've kind of been happy with the result, but also acknowledging the fact that the performance hasn't quite mirrored the result. But it reminded me of, I don't know if you've seen the Joker movie, Jack, but when he's in the studio with Robert De Niro before he, spoiler, blows his brains out, he says, "You get what you fucking deserve," and we got what we deserved today.
Yeah, we did. It was a really poor performance. The first half especially was very bad. And like you said, we've I think the games have all been, they could have gone either way, the games we've had, and we've just come out on the right side of them. So I don't think we've been totally dominated in any game. I think the first half of this game was the worst, was the most we've been dominated. But we could easily have lost every game, and we haven't lost 1 in 5 before this. So I think, like you said, it had been in the post. I think it was coming, a result like this. And it throws up all sorts of worries and concerns and questions about where the team's going and what the direction is and what the problem is and how we're going to solve it. It's a lot of uncomfortable questions that come out of this one. But I think Fulham won it fair and square, and it was lost in the first half, even though we actually could and maybe should have actually pulled it back as well in the second.
Definitely should have pulled it back,
which I think would have been like unjustified on the balance of play. It was another game where we had a good half hour probably, and it was the start of the second half this time, but the damage had already been done by then. So fair play to Fulham, and the Skibby who we talked to the other day was he wasn't that confident that they'd win. But he did say the midfield would be the big battle, and they definitely came out on top there, and that's where I think it was lost for us and won for them.
Yeah, we'll get into the midfield shortly, but we did, and I think that there has been a few people, not just on our channel, but on social media and things like that. And I know social media is not really a moral compass or anything like that, but they have been, I guess, positive that things would turn. Like we aren't playing well, and we went. I think it was the start of the 22-23 season where we drew a lot of games and stuff like that. And I distinctly remember you and Dimmy were really big, and that no, this like things are going to turn around. Like all the stats and stuff like that are sort of indicating that we are playing well and we are a good team. We're just not converting draws into wins and stuff like that. But you were really big on the XG. That's kind of when the XG wanker stuff kind of was born and things like that. So I thought this afternoon, when I was sort of wallowing in my sporting sorrows, that I would go through the XG for the start of the season and see if it kind of did match what we see with our eyes and things like that. And it's funny that you can watch a game and you go to St James's Park, you get 52,000 people there watching a game, and they'll all tell you 52,000 different things about what they've seen, and they're all watching the same thing. So, having said that, the XG we haven't won an XG all year, so that sort of tells you, yeah, your eyes are kind of telling you right. And I don't think it's a 6-game thing either, Jack. I think this is kind of our away form's been pretty stinky for probably nearly 12 months now. This isn't a this season thing. Like there's a serious problem there with our away form and the way we play away from home, isn't there?
I think since obviously December, January, February was awful. Like the early part of 2024 was really bad. But if you look at after then, we beat Burnley, we had a win against Brentford, we beat Fulham as well. So we did have some. We beat Villa as well. We did have
The Villa game was probably the highest one, I reckon. Yeah,
there were some away wins in the second half of the season that were a bit better than the first half of last season. But we beat Forest as well, but it was a struggle. You know, like it felt difficult, the away games, and like even like Wolves this season. You know, we were lucky really to win that game, and Bournemouth we were lucky to get a draw as well. So there's definitely an issue with the away form, but I don't think it's just the away form. I think it's the performances in general this season have been really bad. It's right what you said though about 22-23. At this stage of that season, when we finished fourth, we had 6 points, and we also had 6 points last season as well. So it doesn't feel like it because of the performances, but we're actually 4 points better off than we were in each of the last 2 seasons. And especially 22-23, we drew with Crystal Palace at home, and then we drew with Bournemouth as well, which is when a few of us were in Sydney. So we'd only won 1 and 7. So it's a bit of a feature that we do start the season slowly under Eddie Howe, and I don't know why that is. I can't put my finger on that. After the first game, which we always win, we tend to have a bit of a drop off afterwards. So this time, but you're right as well. What you said, the underlying numbers in that 22-23 were good. Like you could tell that we were playing well, and that somebody was gonna cop an absolute hiding at some point.
We said,
and then
I remember we said this for weeks, didn't we? Yeah, we said this the whole time that someone's going to cop it.
Yeah,
like you can see it coming. All the numbers, like I said, all the numbers bloody suggested that someone was going to cop it. Now, you kind of look at the fixtures and you're like, shit, like where's our next win actually going to come from here?
Yeah, 22-23 Fulham, we beat them 4-1, and then we beat Brentford 5-1, and that was it. We clicked, and we were absolutely away on fire then. Last season we beat Brentford 1-0, and then we beat Sheffield United 8-0. But then, so the start of last season wasn't too bad. But yeah, it's just funny that the points are better than the performances have been, and it is concerning that the underlying numbers and the XG and all of that stuff has not been coming as well. Because otherwise, I'd feel more positive than I do right now. Right now, I just feel a bit disconcerted that I'm not sure where it's going to go from here, and I feel like Eddie's got a massive job to actually try and find his best team, but more importantly, a system that works and that all of the players know what job they're doing, because we had that previously and I don't feel like we've got that now. But it does actually feel a bit similar to last season. The Brighton game, the 3-1 against Brighton, this game reminded me a lot of that because we were just completely soundly beaten in that game. And the midfield was totally bypassed in that game as well. And it was the same players. It was Jolinton and Bruno were playing. And Tonali actually started that Brighton game. And obviously he didn't start this one, which we'll probably talk about as well. But there's definitely an issue with the balance of the midfield. And that, I think, was more than anything else what cost us today and what has really cost us performances in the last few weeks as well.
Yeah. So on the team and the balance and the midfield in particular, do you think that the the injury crisis of the last, let's call it 9 months, has kind of masked the fact that Eddie doesn't know what his best team is yet, because he kind of got away with it last year because he had to pick the same blokes nearly every week because there was literally no one else to pick. Now we do have most of them injured blokes back and fit and available, especially in that midfield sort of area, apart from Lewis Miley. Do you think now it's kind of bubbled to the surface to say, right, like, I don't think he actually knows what his best midfield mix is now, that he's actually got the players to pick from?
I think that was the case last season as well. Like I said, with that Brighton game, we had Tonali, Bruno, and Joe Linton in the midfield that game. And that was only one player different from this game. And it's right. I don't think he does know what his best midfield is. I think Bruno's obviously in it. Joe Linton, you would think when he's fit, he'd be in it, but his form's not been good. Longstaff has been playing pretty much every game, and sometimes because of necessity, but also because Eddie trusts him. And I think he could actually see today why he trusts him in that role. You know, Willock has been good coming off the bench, and he brings a lot going forward when he's playing well, but he was just sort of anonymous today, and that's not the first time that's happened when he started games either. So the midfield is a problem, and it depends if we're going to stay with the 4-3-3 as well, because we switched it up at half time and we went to the 4-2-3-1 system. And maybe that's the way that maybe he's thinking longer term about if he wants to try and fit Gordon and Barnes into the same team, maybe that's what he's going to have to do, or he wants to try and get some more, the ball forward better so Isak's not as isolated, because the 4-3-3 doesn't seem to be working and we're not playing this with the same intensity, the same high pressing. So maybe that's something he's thinking about as well. But I don't think he does know his best midfield 3 or maybe the midfield 2. But I think we're going to have to try and land on something that we're going to get a bit of consistency with and we're going to be able to move forward with, because, yeah, he's definitely struggling to put his finger on what's the right balance and what's the most effective. But it's interesting, like I said, everyone wanted Sean Longstaff out the team and he's come out the team and this is probably the worst we've played. So it's just funny the way it works.
Yeah, they'd never admit that there was Sean Longstaff was the reason why. But on the Willock and Tonali thing, so I think what would your reasons be why Sandro Tonali hasn't started a game yet since he's returned? You're trying to guess as to why he hasn't started. What would you say would be maybe a couple of the reasons?
This is the one thing, honestly. Like I probably trust Eddie Howe more than any Newcastle fan, and I know that he'll have his reasons for this. But the fact he started twice for Italy, I just cannot get my head around this fact he hasn't started either of these last 2 games, especially this game. The Spurs game, maybe you can understand. He's just coming back and he'd started against Forest. But then he went and played for Italy twice and he had great assist and he had man of the match in one of the games against France. And then we went to Wolves and maybe, we won that game and he came on and affected the game. And, Longstaff started that one and we got the result. But to get to today, I just don't understand. I really don't know why he's not starting him, because when we bought Tonali, obviously we knew that Bruno was going to be there and Joe Linton and Willock, and there was a plan for him. There was a plan, and we only had him for 12 games last season, and it didn't look clear at times what was happening, but he was kind of settling into the culture and the language and all that sort of stuff. So maybe he was going to take a bit of time to bed in, but he's had 12 months training since then now, so in his English is good and he's been, he looks fit and strong. He plays well every time he plays. So I think he should be the first name on the team sheet along with, Bruno and Isak. So I don't know. I really don't know why. We know that Eddie likes to bed players in slowly, but like I said, he's been training with the team for 12 months. So to me, it's very strange. And if he's not going to play, if he wasn't going to play Longstaff, then, I can see Willock, he drives forward well. Joe Linton, maybe he's trying to play him into a bit of form. Bruno's out of form as well, but you're not going to drop Bruno because this happened last season as well, and there was calls for him to be dropped after a few games, which he then, laughed in everyone's face and shut everybody up not long. And I'm sure that will happen again. But I really don't know why I did not start this game, and it's the one selection decision that Eddie Howe's made in his career here that I just can't. It's a real head scratcher, and I can't understand why.
Yeah, because this is how I was sort of bouncing today. Like, I'd understand, like, the first game back, just ease him into it, things like that. But then he goes away and plays 2 90-minute games for Italy. Part of me kind of understands, maybe a bit more than they thought. Maybe we have to hold him back another week and stuff like that, which is fine, and you get it. And it's not about now; it's more about the long game and easing into it and things like that. And I understood, and Eddie kind of alluded to that in the press conference on Friday. I watched that. It was Friday night, our time. So, and he kind of, he alluded to it. It was more of a long game and things like that. And I get it, and that's fine. But Joe Willock has missed a lot, a lot of games in the last 12 months through injury. So Tonali, although he hasn't been playing, he's been training. I think he might have had a couple of spells in between that 10 months and maybe go away, have a little holiday, mental fresh and things like that. But Joe Willock's been in out, and when the talk about, given how good he was coming off the bench last week and stuff like that, and Harvey Barnes as well, that maybe he should look for a starting role. Oh, I was thinking he's the last bloke I'd be starting, given his injury history and easing him back and making sure he doesn't. He's already missed games this season with injury. Like, he's the one you kind of want to filter in and drip feed and drip feed and drip feed until he gets up to speed, and then he starts and Tonali doesn't. I'm like, well, that's throwing that completely out of the water now. Like, it makes no sense at all to me.
And Willock's a very different profile of player, so that might have been part of the thinking. But he started on the right though he started on the left of the three, didn't he? And Joe Linton was on the right
Yeah,
of the three, which again, that's moving Joe Linton out of his best position that he's played so well in for us, because he's usually played on the left. So all I can really think is that he wanted Willock's legs and his ability to drive forward, and he wanted to see how he linked up with Gordon on that right hand side, because it's a strong team on paper, and the team was only one player different from what I thought it might be. And I thought Trippier was going to start, and I thought Kelly was going to start as well. But going back to Tonali, he was away in international duty, but then there was a few decisions for the Wolves game, like Lewis Hall had been away, and he
yeah, and
played instead of Kelly. And
Livermento had
yeah,
played.
Livermento had
Oh,
been
he
away,
no,
and
he
he
didn't
played.
play though. He went away.
Yeah, Trippier hadn't been away
But
though, and
yeah,
Kelly hadn't been away, and they didn't start against Wolves. So
yeah,
it can't be just that he'd been working with them for 2 weeks, But especially this one though, he's had a week after Wolves, all of the information that's
full
come
week
from
of
that game,
training. Yeah,
a full week of training, and this is really, I thought he would play what he would determine to be his best team. And for the second game in a row, he's made subs at half time. So it's an acknowledgement. And I think there's quotes from him that acknowledge he didn't get it right. So he's saying, accepting himself at the moment, he's not getting it right. And it is very similar to last season, the Brighton game. It was difficult fixtures. We had Liverpool and Man City and Brighton last season, and the season before, actually, in those first 5 games. So the fixtures have been a bit different, but it did just remind me a lot of that, the sort of lack of direction in the midfield. But this time it wasn't a surprise, though, because of how we've played up to this
yeah.
point of the season.
So with these halftime changes, now this is the second week in a row that I can't. It might have happened since he's taken. I can't remember it. And it's definitely, if it happened, definitely hasn't happened 2 weeks in a row. Now, look, obviously the easy conclusion to make is they've got it wrong from at the start of the game, but if you look at it on a different lens, they've got it wrong during the week as well. Have they completely sort of scouted the way Fulham play, and they've sort of picked the team they think is going to play well against the Fulham team that they've scouted, and this is what their strengths are, and okay, let's pick these guys to try and take away their strengths, but actually really make us play well at the same time. Now, for 2 weeks in a row, like, they've got that horribly wrong. Like, they're going to have to. There's going to be some serious questions asked, not just after the game, but during the week as well, to say, are we setting this team up? And everyone was sort of acknowledging the fact that, no, Europe this year, hey, Eddie's really good when he's got a week with the players to prepare and everything like that. But like, these last 2 weeks have kind of been a bit of a question mark around his ability to get teams ready in a week, because at halftime they've had to change it twice.
You should watch this podcast previews because we could have told them how Fulham were going to play because Skibby told us. So I think, though, in a way, choosing Willock is a positive, attacking, aggressive sort of choice, but it just didn't work in this game, and he wasn't strong enough in the midfield. And it's not all Willock's fault. He's not the only one who didn't perform in that first half. But yeah, like obviously, there's been an acknowledgement that in both of the last 2 weeks, it hasn't worked from the beginning. The team has not been doing the job it's supposed to, and this is a stick that Eddie has been beaten with, that he doesn't make changes early enough, and that he's only got one system. Well, he did change the system completely for the second half of this game, and I think it was because he wanted to keep Gordon on the pitch, who, frankly, is lucky that he wasn't pulled off at half time. And I don't want to go in too hard on Gordon as well, but his body language and his performance was all over the place, and he's trying to play him in. Yeah, it was Everton. He's trying to play him into some form as well. And, there's an acknowledgement he's not playing in his best position because Harvey Barnes is scoring a lot of goals from that left-hand side. So, in a way, these are good problems to have. You've got good players competing for positions on the pitch. And it's like I said, totally different from last season when we basically played for pretty much a third of the season with Bruno, Longstaff and Lewis Miley in the midfield when everybody else was injured or suspended. So, yeah, like it just throws up different challenges, which you hope, and I'm confident he'll be able to fix it, and he'll land on something that works. Because we've got so many good players, and he's such a good manager, and I think we will get there. But I think he's trying to change the way we play a bit as well, to be a bit more possession and have a bit more control. And the possession stats will probably back that up. That
I think it was over 60% last night as well, from memory.
And we're not playing on the break, on the counter attack as much, and we're not pressing as much. So I think we're trying to get a bit more control, and which is what the top teams do. They control the ball more and they control the game more. And I've seen a few of these tactical accounts on Twitter saying that the build-up is different, and it's with a view of getting more control. So it's fallen down a bit because the players are not performing. We're giving the ball away really badly and sit in bad positions, and it's just sloppy passing. So technically, the players are not pulling off what he wants them to do. There was a point of this game around the half-hour mark where, again, not to pick on Anthony Gordon, but he gave the ball away about 4 times in the space of a minute. And it was just really frustrating. But he wasn't the only one who was giving it away, and the big players are not playing well at the moment. And I think that's all coming together into this performance and this result last night.
Like, I think as well, like, we are, especially in the front there, we are fast. Like, we've got pace. Isak's fast, Murphy's quick, Gordon's got pace as well. Willock, when he comes on, like you said, he sort of drives and is really quick with the ball. And you probably don't appreciate how quick he is with the ball until you see someone chasing him and you realise, shit, he's actually not getting any ground on him here. But I think the way teams have played us now is a real tactic to foul us and stop the game and let them kind of reset and get their bodies behind the ball and not get stuck and not get caught with us either trying to counterattack or play through them in transition. And I think that's probably that's something that I've picked up as well. I remember us sort of being that team to stop the game and the old shithousery and all that sort of stuff. But it's actually a really, really good tactic to sort of get you set up behind the ball right, get the game to stop, and a bit of brouhaha. And the more time you waste in these niggly fouls and a reaction and you react back, it's all just a game so everyone can every second counts. Like, get everyone set up behind the ball and things like that. And teams are starting to do that to us now, it feels like. And we're the ones who are struggling in possession. We don't really seem to be penetrating as much because they've sort of stopped the game and set up behind the ball.
Yeah, and it's a legitimate tactic. Absolutely. We've done it, like I said, 2 seasons ago. We were the masters at doing this. And the thing is, it annoys players like Bruno and Gordon when they're getting kicked, that they feel like they're getting fouled and they're not getting the calls. It annoys them. They let their head go down. They get frustrated. Joe Linton last week got booked not long after he felt injustice. So, we need to be smarter about this and just work out ways around it. But I do think we're trying to get more control, more possession. But that just makes even less sense that Tonali, who is probably our best player at keeping the ball, didn't start.
It's really secure.
Because it's harder to do that when you've got Sean Longstaff, who is limited technically, and Joe Linton's not the best passer as well. So if you're going to play that way, and you've got to think that must have been part of the thinking behind bringing Tonali in the first place, because that's what he really lifts the technical standard in the midfield and the level of the players. So yeah, it's very, and I don't really know the tactical sort of what we've been doing or the variances, but it hasn't looked good to supporters,
Yeah.
and it hasn't, and it's just been very obvious that we've had a good half-hour period in most games, and the rest of it we haven't been good. We've been very sloppy. We've given the ball away a lot, and that's pretty much as in depth as my tactical knowledge goes. But
Yeah,
that's what it's looked like, and like I said, we've all thought that this performance and this result has been coming.
yeah, absolutely, and that's my strategic fouling is probably as in depth as my tactical knowledge will go as well. Couple other things before we might turn the corner here. Do you think this? I guess let's call it 6 games. We'll chuck the Forest game in there as well, because I think it was very similar to the other 5 league games as well. Do you think not buying a first team player in the last 2 transfer windows has contributed to this? Whereas it could be a sort of double-edged sword here. With obviously we haven't improved the first team as one thing, but the guys who are there already, could they feel a bit comfortable within themselves, knowing that my spot's not really under threat massively, because we know that these guys that we've got in the squad aren't up to the quality of what a first team incoming player would be?
That's quite a hard question, because we have got competition now, so we've got better players on the bench, and I think it's hard to say that the players are getting comfortable, because I think there is reasonable competition for most positions, apart from up front at the minute with Wilson injured. But I think the atmosphere around the club, and I don't know if you want to talk about that stuff as well.
Yeah,
but
that's the
yeah,
that's the last one I wanted to
yeah, okay. Well, I won't touch on that now then, but I think that you get a boost when you sign players. But we should have had a boost by having more players available this season than we had last season, and I think it's just a case of we're struggling to land on the right players, but more importantly, I think we're struggling to land on the right system. Where everybody knows what job they're doing, and the substitutes know what is expected of them when they come on, because I think we're trying to transition to be this team that's got more control of games, and we're struggling with that at the moment. And maybe it's always part of a sort of, if you're going to tweak the way you play, there's always going to be growing pains, and I think that's probably part of it as well. But we've got individual quality that we can rely on. The goal today was a great goal. Harvey Barnes has now got 3 goals, so we're always a threat. And if Fabian Schär hadn't kind of had that rush of blood, and all he had to do is tap it 5 yards sideways, and Isak had a tap in, and then who knows what would have happened. So even then, the margins are fine still, and we were still in it really up until Bruno gave the ball away and they got their 3rd goal. But they showed that's how to sort of accept a gift with that goal. Fabian Schär, which isn't like him, kind of lost his head a little bit. And he could have just passed it.
Yeah. I do think though there is a natural lift when you sign a decent player. No disrespect to Lloyd Kelly or William Basula or any of the 15 goalkeepers that we also signed in the summer. They just didn't have the spark of what a Tonali did or a Gordon did or someone like that. So I do think there is something in that it feels a bit stale at the moment. It's probably one way to put it. But yeah, the last thing I wanted to talk about before we might quickly turn the corner and look forward to the cup game midweek is, do you think this off-field stuff is starting to affect the stuff on the field now? Now, this isn't just the Paul Mitchell, Eddie Howe obvious banging of heads together. Like there's clearly some major problems between them two at the moment, and Eddie pretty much indirectly referenced that in his press conference, that when he was asked if he'd spoken to Mitchell, he'd kind of brushed it off and said he'd spoken to all the board members and stuff regularly this week, and didn't actually reference him by name. Now, if he'd actually spoken to him, I'm sure he would have said, yes, I have spoken to Paul Mitchell this week, but he hasn't. And there's a massive problem there. And I think not just that, I think there is still a little bit of, I guess, residue with the whole PSR thing of having to sell. Elliot Anderson as well, the local guy, I think he was really well liked, and he comes across as a pretty fun bloke in the club videos the club do with the darts and all the little funny games they do and stuff. He always seems like he was in them and laughing with everyone. And, these are the guys you really like around your club. They're well liked. They get along with everyone. And they're kind of like a glue that brings everyone together, not just with their personality, but given his local connection and stuff like that. Like, you can't just replace a player like him. And this is going to sound stupid for a guy who's never even scored for us, Jack, in a senior appearance, but I just can't help but think that some of these things do have a residual effect, and later on, kind of, you don't realise it till they're gone.
Yeah, and not only that, but Anthony Gordon was basically being touted around, and I think it's probably accurate that did happen. Nobody wants to believe that, because it's not a nice thing to think that our best player from last season is being sort of touted around because we're desperate for money, but that's happened. And Sean Longstaff has come out and said it was a very unsettling period of time because none of the players felt settled. They all felt like they had a price on their head and that anyone could have gone at any time. Unluckily for Elliot Anderson, it was him who got sacrificed, and Minte, which wasn't quite as hard to take because we didn't see him at all. But to lose a local boy like that was really upsetting, really. And whether we like it or not, the journalists are still asking these questions, and the club have not done a good job of shutting it down and saying, no, there is no problem. Or, I was listening to a podcast today about, and it was The Athletic, and they were talking about Klopp and Michael Edwards at Liverpool, who had some absolute barneys over the years, but none of it ever made it out into the public domain too much. So they would always have a united front, and they would say, no, it's fine, we're getting on really well. When, any elite relationship where you've got elite people who have got opinions about things, there's always going to be differences of opinion, and that's fine. That's how good decisions are made, and that's how you get growth, when you've got people pushing each other. But the way that this has all just played out so publicly since that interview, since Mitchell was just basically parachuted in without Eddie knowing about it, seemingly, and then there was the England link and the interview in Germany, and then there was Mitchell's interview, and then there's just been a lot, and there's obviously something there. And I actually hold Darren Eales, because he's the guy who is responsible for getting everyone on the same page. It's such a difference from when Staveley and Gudusi, then everyone was united and pulling in the same direction. But I think it's Eales' job to get them in a room and say, look, we'll have discussions, you can have disagreements about things, but in public, this is the message. This is what we both have to say. That'll shut it down, and we can work on the relationship behind the scenes in the run up to January, and we can focus on the football, and the journalists will stop asking about this, because it's
destabilizing.
Seeped. It's destabilizing, and it's seeped. I don't know, you can't quantify the impact it's had on the performances on the pitch, but there's just a whole feeling around the club of instability, and people are not all together, and that's a big problem. Like, that's seeped onto the pitch in one way or another, and the whole feeling around the club, and you've got fans who are taking one person's side or another. And I think, like I said, it's Darren Eales' job to get a grip of this, and it's Eddie Howe's responsibility to do what he can to shut it down, even if he's lying in press conferences and saying, oh yeah, it's fine,
who's going to know
today? Who's going to know? And it'll stop Craig Hope every week asking the same question, which then just drags it on. Nobody wants to be talking or thinking about this stuff, but you can't deny that it's
until they put it to bed,
having an impact.
And
exactly.
I think even as well, like just as you were sort of talking then, I remember at the back end of last season, we had Chris Woff on just after they announced this tour for Australia. Even that, and I can't remember if he mentioned this when we're recording or when we weren't recording, but so apologies, Chris, if we weren't recording. But he mentioned the players were fuming that they were coming out here. It wasn't the fact that they were coming out here. It was the fact that they were coming out here when their season was meant to be over. And that really kind of pissed him off. And I think that was a bit of an Eales decision. And the fact that he didn't come, I think Peter Silverstone was probably the highest ranking club official that come out, and great bloke Peter, lucky enough to have a beer with him at Crown, where all good things happen, Jack, as you might find out when you come down here to do your marathon. But even from then, like, I think the divide, that might be maybe not the start of the divide, but it was definitely, it started really getting a bit rotten from then. And then obviously the whole PSR thing, and now this director of football, sporting director, head coach Barney's just making it turn to shit.
Australia was a ridiculous decision. Like, you know, it's good for us because we got to see them and everything.
Yeah,
not good
it was
for
great
me because I only went to the second game. But no, it was just a decision made purely for money at the end of a season like we just had when there was an international tournament coming on. It was just crazy, you know, like it was absolutely mad. And I remember Amanda Staveley went onto Instagram to defend something about the trip, but something about the club this summer, and George Culkin said this when he was on, it was such a family-friendly club before, and maybe with Amanda and Murdad, and maybe it was always going to move away from that. But now it's like, it's a bit more cold, a bit more corporate, and Darren Eales does what he can with the fan stuff, and that's obviously his forte that he did at Atlanta. He seems to be a personable guy who, you know, he speaks to the fans and he's approachable, but the club has got this corporate structure in place now, and it's cold, and you know, it's not as warm and fuzzy as it has been, especially in 22-23, which when we're all on that magical ride all together, and that's just not what it is anymore. And maybe that's like always going to be part of the change, you know, as the club develops and gets bigger. But they've missed the boat with the way the messaging and the way they've communicated what's been going on this summer, and it has been very destabilizing and unsettling. And it was a real shock when Sean Longstaff actually came out and admitted that, you know, the players were unsettled. There was stories about Trippier wanting to leave, you know, and he wasn't happy. And the squad's now got players who wanted to leave or who we tried to sell. So it's not that same big happy family, you know, that we were 2 years ago. And maybe there's no point in having nostalgia for that because things have moved on now. But there's still people like Eddie there, obviously, who thrives when everyone's united and pulling together. And he got that squad united and pushing forward together. And there's a bit of sadness that that's not there anymore, maybe as well. And maybe that's, like I said, you can't quantify or put numbers on this stuff, but I think it has showed in the performances this season. And maybe it's an overreaction to one bad result, but like I said, it's not just one bad result, it's a bunch of bad performances as well. And we've got players that should be capable of so much more than what's been shown this season.
Yeah. And just before we move on, like, I think you made a very, really good point there, that it was a family club and everyone seemed warm and welcoming. And I just remember when Tonali signed and they're in the meeting room at the training base, and Kieran Trippier's there welcoming him. And, you know, I know what it was like. Let me know if you need anything. Because, when I went over to Spain, it was really hard, the language and stuff. And I know it's not like that. There's probably shit like that happening all the time still. No, there's not, because no real players have come in. So most of them have been
Lloyd Kelly can already speak English.
Yeah, he's all good. He knows where Greg's is and things like that. But he knows the Weatherspoons, all that sort of stuff. Whereas Tonali didn't. And just things like that. And we've spoke about it, and I think other podcasts have spoken of that. Amanda was like a mother figure around the club and stuff like that. And she made you feel, or at least on the surface, she made you feel warm, and she was like that, like the mother, like always looking after her boys and things like that. Now she's gone. We've tried to sell, like, you can't help but think you do feel loved, but then at the same time, when the club are actively trying to give you the flick, you kind of lose that feeling pretty quickly. And even if it wasn't them, when you've seen how they do it, you kind of start thinking, shit, like, am I, like, if they're going to get rid of Elliot Anderson, like, why can't they get rid of me? Like, what am I going to do? Like, am I just I'm not a person anymore. I'm just a player. I'm a dollar amount. Really, that's all I am now. Like, it'd be hard not to think that.
Yeah, and and from a fan's perspective as well, when the fans have been putting the money into the club, solidly, buying replica shirts and going to the stack and buying 10 pints before every match probably, and the ticket increases have happened, so the fans have played their part in sort of pumping the money into the club and trying to do what we can. And things like the stadium feasibility study, there was someone said about 6 weeks ago it was imminent, and what's happening? What's going on with that? And
so this is going to be another thing that's going to divide everyone as well, because half will want to stay and half will want a new stadium, and it doesn't matter which way this study will go, what they're going to do. And you keep hearing they only want to write one check and blah blah blah, which is fine, but you're going to get half the fans and they're going to be still pissed off, no matter which way this decision goes with that.
But this is the problem with the summer, is that the trust, and I think I said this with Dimmy, it might have been the other week, but the trust in the hierarchy is not there anymore. It was there for 2 years. It was pure love and trust that these guys have got our backs. They want what we want. They're ambitious.
Because they showed it.
They showed it by, what they were doing in the transfer market. And obviously we couldn't keep spending that way, because that's why we got into the mess we did get into. But the trust was there that there was a plan and that there was a process and that everyone was pulling in, working towards the same thing. And the big problem now for the club is that trust is not there anymore. It's gone because of what happened in the summer and because of all the upheaval. And that's why things like the feasibility study, the training ground, what's going on? I don't know. I can't sit here and say that there is trust now that the club know what they're doing, because on recent weeks and months, I don't know if Darren Eales does know what he's doing. Certainly not in the way that it appeared he did before. So it's time for action. It's words are fine, but I don't really want to hear from Paul Mitchell again until January, after January transfer window. It doesn't matter what they say. Jamie Rubin did a tweet after the Spurs game, just a load of words basically, and it was just don't tweet. Let's have action.
Yeah.
Eddie can feel let down that he wasn't backed, and he can have a good argument to say that if Europe was the target, they haven't equipped him with the squad. I actually think the squad is still good enough, and we should be getting top 6 with our squad, which we are still in the top 6, by the way. But I think performances will improve. But the point I was making is I can't believe the club when they say that the stadium feasibility study is imminent, when they said that 6 weeks ago, and they've been talking about it, as if it's going to happen anytime now, and it hasn't. So where the actions speak louder than words now, and we need to start seeing action from the hierarchy at the club.
Yeah, I remember a prominent AFL coach here, Jimmy, once said, it might have been in the late 90s, don't piss down my back and tell me it's raining. And that's kind of starting to ring true now. So we might wrap that up now, mate. This is it. Let's put a full stop to this. Hopefully we can get a result in the cup this week, because if we go out, holy shit, I don't know what's going to happen. This joint could implode and explode at the same time. So stay tuned. We'll be back later on in the week with a cup review, and we might touch on next weekend's game as well. But depending on what happens in the cup, surely Sandro Tonali can start a game this weekend
against League 2 opposition.
I think this might be it. Hopefully, I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't, but hopefully this is it. But mate, thank you for your time. It kills me to say it, but good luck next weekend, and enjoy the week, because I always said, mate, you don't know when your next one's going to come, so make sure you enjoy it, live in the moment, don't shy away from it or anything like that. Consume and absorb everything you can, because you don't know when it's going to happen again, mate.
I'll have my own little public holiday on Friday as well, since we don't get one here in Queensland.
Yeah, unlucky for you. All right, mate. Good to talk to you. We'll see everyone soon.
Bye.